So this is not a finance channel, but I think it's important to let everybody know that the UK, the United Kingdom, is pretty much going bankrupt.
Can anyone actually afford to live in the UK anymore? So today we're going to break it down.
Rachel Reeves has lost her mind.
Unbelievable. So Labour's been in power for what, 5 minutes? And they've already blown through £171 billion.
Don't ever let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government.
Now, I'm borderline dyslexic when it comes to maths, right? But Reeves will axe two-child benefit while soaking the rich with £30 billion of tax hikes. Hints, Minister.
The national debt need never be repaid.
We've got some major problems ahead. The British economy is about to fall off a cliff, and I'm seriously worried about it.
You know things are bad with the cost of living crisis. The most radical person in the country now is Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert. Remember the good old days when you would just go on his website to try and figure out how to save money renewing your car insurance? Now you see him on the news, he's like, we all need to bomb the British gas headquarters now. He's mainly a consumer rights advocate. He's now the most radical political activist we've got. Martin Lewis King Jr. all of a sudden. I have a dream that one day little boys and little girls will hold hands and it won't just be for warmth.
Pretty much everybody in the UK, and pretty much everybody who's visited the UK recently, has the sense that nothing's working. Compare the UK to the US, and a middle-income American, their equivalent person in the UK is really badly off. Maybe 30%, 40% less rich, much less productive, much less output in terms of how many days they work and how much they produce. It's not crazy at all to say I'd rather have more time with my kids than more time, more money and more time at work. But the UK doesn't actually do that. Americans could stop working the end of September, on the 22nd of September, and they'd still earn more money than the UK, than Britons working for the whole year.
Say goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
Khalil.
Thank you.
Hello, it's me, Rachel Reeves. I have a few updates to help with growth. As of today, I can confirm that there are now going to be 3 new policies in the UK. Number 1. Anybody that has been in the sun and has a tan or sunburn from the heat wave now has to pay tan tax at 25% APR plus VAT. You've clearly had time on your hands and can afford it. So now it's time to burn a hole in your wallet. Number 2. Anybody that's on a diet to get a summer body now has to pay diet tax at 50% LIDL plus RAC. I want to go on a diet, but I'm too stressed. Now it's not jealousy, it's just fair is fair. Finally, number 3. Anybody who doesn't cry in their places of work once per month in front of people now has to pay happy tax at 90% FBI plus double Ds. I'm a human woman and I can cry, so cry with me or pay. Look who's laughing now. Ha 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 ha. So there you go. This will improve the country, and I will be back next week with some new policies in my devotion to this country. Goodbye. It's okay to cry. Cry with me.
UK government's spending money like they're on fucking holiday. Yeah, that's all right. I'll pay €30 for a bottle of, sunscreen. Oh, that's all right. You want to float? €40. Fine. Excursion, €200. No problem. You'd never do this back home, really. Do you remember when the government came to power last year and they said there was a £22 billion black hole? Well, I do. And magically over the past year, well, not even a year actually, it's ended up being 50 billion. What are they spending it on?
Welcome to Blighty Blighted, the place we can freely express ourselves as true Brits. Well, looks like we're on the road to economic collapse again. Only this time there's not even a decent pub left to drown our sorrows in. Back in the 50s and 60s, we had proper chancellors, people who actually understood money, not whatever this lot are doing. Men in suits who could balance a budget without needing a PowerPoint presentation or a focus group. You might not have liked their policies, but at least the pound didn't need counselling. Now we've got this clown, Rachel Reeves, talking about stability. And every time a politician says that word, I start checking how much my savings have shrunk overnight. Stability. A paper bag in a hurricane's got more stability than the British economy right now. In my day, we worked hard, saved a bit, and could actually afford a house. Now the young ones can't even afford a front door. I saw one the other day. Bloke had a mortgage on a shed. We've taxed ambition, borrowed from the future, and somehow convinced ourselves it's all fine because someone on telly says growth with a straight face. The country's skint, the politicians are clueless, and the bankers are already measuring up the yacht decks. I tell you what, if we're heading for collapse, at least let's do it properly. Bit of music, a nice cup of tea, and the dignity of admitting we've completely lost the plot.
Interest rates have now come down 5 times since Labour came to office, in part because of the stability that we've managed to return to the economy after the chopping and changing, the mini budget under the Conservatives and Liz Truss. And what that means, that fifth cut in interest rates, is that if you're taking out a mortgage for £215,000, you're going to be paying on a variable rate around £140 less a month than when we came to office just over a year ago. So this is good news for people wanting to get on the housing ladder, people remortgaging, and also businesses borrowing to grow.
Billionaire hedge fund manager Ray Dalio has said that the UK is now in a debt doom loop of low growth, high taxes and a ballooning debt pile, and he's also warned that raising taxes will cause wealthy people to leave the UK. And this comes after UK government borrowing has surged to 20.7 billion, 3.6 billion higher than expected in June, and this will only fuel fears of a new raid in the autumn budget. The hike in capital gains tax also hasn't delivered the expected revenue increases, and whilst many will put this down to the Laffer curve, which is real, it's also worth noting that 2021 and 2022 were abnormally high years for capital gains tax receipts because of the pandemic boom, and so these receipts were always going to normalise, plus the fact that people can just hold on to assets for longer because tax is only due when gains are realised. One place the Chancellor could potentially raise taxes is the gambling industry, and I doubt many people will be shedding tears for bookies if they have to pay more tax on their profits, especially as many UK operators base some activities offshore in order to avoid UK corporation tax. And in my opinion, gambling is a tax already because in the long run the game is rigged against you, and so further de-incentivising this might not be a terrible thing.
World as it is right now, people will be astonished to hear that.
And I have to respond to that.
They think that you think, or that you're saying that you've stabilised the economy. The economy is completely flatlined. You have inflation 3.8%, way above target. Food and drink inflation, people's bills, shopping bills, rose to 5.1% in August. If you want to buy beef, that's up almost 25%. You say that the manifesto stands. Labour wouldn't increase taxes on working people, wouldn't increase national insurance, the basic higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. You can't rule out raising VAT, and you raise national insurance for working people who are employers. So, you know, aren't you out of touch with the people watching your interview?
I'm the first to accept that there is more to do. Absolutely there's more to do to make working people better off. Absolutely there's more to do to bring down hospital waiting lists. But if someone had said 15 months ago that but there's more to do. I know that, so I absolutely recognise that. I see that every day when I talk to people, when I talk to businesses. But we've made a start in turning around the condition of the economy.
Is Britain heading for its own debt crisis? A new survey from Deutsche Bank has put the UK second only to France as the major economy most at risk of a bond market meltdown. France takes the top spot with over half of investors saying it's the most likely to face a crisis-level bond sell-off. Political deadlock is the reason. 3 prime ministers have already resigned, trying to pass a budget and a deficit is at 5.8% of GDP, worse than any G7 economy except the US. But the UK isn't far behind. A fifth of investors think that Britain is the most likely to tip into a bond crisis, and nearly half ranked its debt as the second most vulnerable after France. That means the UK is now seen as shakier than Japan and even the United States, which is running a $1.8 trillion deficit. What investors are watching most closely is the yield on 10-year gilts, the benchmark for government borrowing. Since November's budget, those yields have climbed more than 40 basis points and they remain at levels not seen since the global financial crisis. Hedge fund billionaire Ray Dalio has gone further, calling it a debt doom loop. He says the UK faces a pattern of rising taxes, rising debt and slower growth. If higher taxes push the wealthiest households to relocate, the government risks losing the group that currently pays around 3/4 of all income tax, though this fear is often overhyped. For credit rating agencies, these signals are crucial. Rising debt, political stalemate and weak investor confidence all feed into whether the country keeps its rating or faces a downgrade. A downgrade would only push borrowing costs even higher. So the UK may not be in an immediate crisis, but when investors start to rank it alongside France, Japan and the US for debt vulnerability, credibility is clearly on the line. The question now is whether policymakers can break the cycle before the markets do it for them, and the upcoming budget is now critical for Rachel Reeves and the country as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
With record spending, record debt levels, no growth, and massive interest payments. And the government in the UK, so this is not a finance channel, I'm a retired finance guy, but I think it's important that people know this. This Chancellor in the UK is sort of messing around, trying to find like little bits of money here and there, and saying that taxing the rich is going to sort out all our problems. It's just not, because we've got like over a trillion a year in spending. But the big problems in the UK is pensions, which are unaffordable, benefits, which are unaffordable, debt interest, which is unaffordable, and that's assuming nothing else goes wrong. So I'm afraid, guys, the UK's prognosis is pretty bad. I was in Cyprus when the Greek crisis unfolded, and it's looking exactly the same thing. I think we're looking at an IMF bailout and a stock market and a bond market crash, because at some point, investors in the UK are going to realise this is never going to get paid back. And all this talk of cutting spending in really small areas, but they just keep borrowing. Like, borrowing is going up, not down. It's crazy. Have fun in the UK, folks. I'm going down with the ship. See you in the next one.
I've always been very clear that we will continue to prioritise economic and fiscal stability in the UK because that is so important for renewal and investment. And so as we get the forecast and as we develop our plans, of course, we're looking at further measures on tax and spending.
If you're looking at the current financial situation we're in and you're going, you know what will fix this is taxing people more. Like, this is insane. This is like somebody who's electrocuted and then you go, you know what restarts a heart? Electricity, so let's electrocute them more. That's how Rachel Reeves is treating the economy in the UK. She has absolutely no idea how to fix it or really what's going on in any way, shape or form. Her budget should contain literally only 3 things: growth, tax cuts to businesses and growth. To be honest, 4, we should be cutting nearly anything that we can. We really need to take a sledgehammer to the triple lock and the pensions. She needs to be means testing it. They need to get their head around this idea of means testing either benefits or just anything where the government gives people money. They have to stop living in this world that it's too complicated, we can't do it. You've got HMRC, you've got the entire data set of HMRC to access things from. You can work these things out. You've got to be smarter than this. You can't just go, there's a fiscal black hole, we need to fill it. That cannot be your political strategy anymore. This is completely insane. You know, and what's the next budget going to be? Oh look, we raised people's taxes, we cut more stuff. It didn't do anything. And businesses are leaving the UK and they're going out of business. What are we going to do? We've got even less money coming in tax. And it's just this not understanding of something like the Laffer curve. And the Laffer curve is basically this theory of you can tax people to a certain point and then it makes them more unproductive, which then means you get less tax revenue coming in. We are so far past the Laffer curve now that it's just frightening. Genuinely, I think if this is as bad as I think it could be, they're going to have to call a general election because no one's going to eat this. No one's going to go, oh my god, yeah, we so voted for this, you know, and blaming this on the Tories, you know, who completely messed the country up. It's completely screwed. But also at the same point, oh my god, the self-inflicted, wounds and cuts and own goals that she did at the last budget. And she's just brought business to a standstill. She's brought the country to a standstill. And the reason no one's investing and no one's spending any money is because everyone's waiting for her budget because we think it's all going to be terrible. And this is the situation she's created. And now she's going on television to say, hey, by the way, it's probably as bad as you think it's going to be.
So it seems that Rachel from Accounts wants to go down in history as the dumbest, stupidest Chancellor of the Exchequer of all time. I've got some evidence to support this. The record was previously held by Gordon Brown, another Labour Chancellor, who back in 1999 came up with the idiotic idea of selling 415 tonnes of the UK's gold, which was around 90% of our gold holdings at the time, at the lowest price that it had been for around 30 years, $275 an ounce. Today that gold would be worth $2,400 per ounce, and the pain lives on. Today Rachel Reeves is suggesting that she's thinking of selling £5 billion worth of Bitcoin, which is today recognised globally as a global asset. She's thinking of selling that $5 billion because she managed to seize it from criminals. Now, why is this dumb? Well, firstly, Bitcoin, you might not know much about it, but it's the fastest rising asset of all time. The price continues to go up because it actually does have a real world use case. $5 billion Rachel is considering selling that for. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that 10 years from now that will be worth $50 billion. Why the hell is she even considering selling it? It's obvious that the price of Bitcoin is going to 10x from here over about a 10-year period, probably even sooner than that, and that will put her in the level, in fact probably 10 levels above the stupid move that Gordon Brown made back in 1999. To make matters worse, Bitcoin is totally traceable. So even though this money was seized from criminals, in theory, it would be possible to identify the people who were involved in the chain of that Bitcoin getting into the Chancellor's hands, making it possible to return stolen Bitcoin to people who had it stolen from them. But of course, governments don't work like that. When they seize assets, they don't make any attempt to return those assets to the people they were stolen from. No, they just scoop them up into their coffers and find ways to piss them away, waste them, rather than helping out the ordinary working people like you and me. Well, that's what I think. What do you think? Drop me a comment here, and if you're not following already, I would appreciate a follow.
Do you want to know why the country is skint? It's very, very, very simple. We're spending too much money. It genuinely is as simple as that. So the government borrowing figures have been released this morning for the month of September, and it's Other than the COVID year, when the government borrowed hundreds of millions to try and drag us out of the economic hole, but other than that single year, this is the highest total for September there has ever been in the history of the country. £20.2 billion borrowed in September alone. That's £1.6 billion higher than the same month last year, which was also under Labour and which was the second highest ever. £20.2 billion. So far this year, in the first 6 months of this financial year, we've borrowed £11.5 billion more than we did last year. So we're going to end up at the end of this year more than £20 billion higher in borrowing than we did last year. Our national debt is getting close to £2.8 trillion. Interest payments, just the interest payments alone on that debt were over £6 billion this month. It's insane. It's unmanageable. And that is despite the fact that the tax rises that went into place in April mean that our overall tax take is also pretty much the highest it's ever been. So we're bringing more money through the door than we've ever brought in before, yet we're still having to borrow more than we've ever borrowed before. What does that tell you? It's completely and utterly unsustainable. It tells you that they are pissing money up the wall on unsustainable projects and bankrupting the country in the process. Now, if they were borrowing this money and spending it and growth was starting to really skyrocket and was starting to take off, and they said it's a short-term measure, within a year growth's going to be so good we won't need to borrow money anymore, you might consider sort of accepting that. But that's not happening. Growth is down. Growth is flatlining. We might perhaps struggle to 1%, 1.1% growth this year. That doesn't even make a dent. Not even a dent. It's insane. What we need is a government that comes in and takes an absolute blowtorch to red tape, to bureaucracy, to waste, to spending on projects that we just can't afford. We need to slash spending by, I would say, 50 to 100 billion pounds a year. And people go, oh, that's austerity. No, it's not, because much of that could just be wasteful crap that nobody will even notice. This government is going to skint us. It's going to completely ruin the country. Economically, it's going to destroy us. Another 4 years of these sorts of borrowing figures and we will never be able to get out of the hole. Something needs to happen. It needs to happen soon. We need an implosion. We need something catastrophic to happen that will force a general election. Because without that, we're all in deep trouble.
Yes, 171 billion, like it's monopoly money. Meanwhile, they're still going on about a £22 billion black hole that they invented to justify taxing the life out of you and I. Turns out the only black hole is between Rachel Reeves's ears, your politically incorrect common sense commentator here, and it's time to break down what Labour's really been up to. Forget fiscal responsibility. This is straight up economic vandalism with a vegan face. Let's have a little look at where your money's actually going. Spending so far under Labour, public sector pay rises 9.4 billion, carbon capture projects 22 billion, literally the exact size of the black hole they made up. Support to Ukraine 15 billion, that's 10 billion in weapons and military training, 5 billion in non-military aid. Overseas climate aid, 11.6 billion. Yes, they're still sending billions abroad to help everyone but their own citizens. Defence spending, 56.9 billion for this year, up from last year, aiming for 2.5% of GDP. NHS pay increases, 1 billion for junior doctors only. Train drivers deals, 675 million, and they still want to strike folks. Extra borrowing this year alone, 151.9 billion. That's 14.6 billion more than expected. That's right, 14.6 billion more. Add it all up, and you've got a government spending binge totaling more than £170 billion, and we're only getting started. And yet Labour's crying about a 22 billion black hole. You spent £22 billion on capturing carbon dioxide and pretending it's going to save the planet, and now you're saying we can't afford tax cuts. We've got pensioners choosing between heating and food, and you're funding climate change conferences in Uganda. you're still giving away 11.6 billion in climate aid, 15 billion to Ukraine, and billions more in foreign aid and migrant hotel bills, while shutting down our own energy, then buying oil and gas from Norway. From the same North Sea we won't drill in, at triple the cost. Honestly, this is economic policy written by a gender studies department. Rachel Reeves calls this stability. This isn't a government. This is a financial demolition crew. Debt at £2.64 trillion, borrowing at record levels, taxes at 38.3% of GDP, the highest since World War II. And what do you get? Closed services, more strikes, more crime, and a lecture on pronouns from a minister in a Tesla. So here's the truth. Labour didn't find a black hole. They dug one, threw your future into it, and then set fire to the shovel. They're not here to build Britain. They're here to loot it, lecture you, and leave the mess behind, just like they always do. If you're done being ripped off by climate fanatics in red rosettes, share this video, follow and subscribe on the link below to support and join the rebellion. Because if we don't fight now, there won't be a Britain left to save.
I've been going over some statistics from the ONS and from .gov.uk. This means they know. They have these statistics, they have this data, and everything I'm going to tell you today is based on UK averages. Just pay attention, because I really think some people in this country have not got a clue how bad some people have it. The cost of living in the UK has spiraled out of control, and we're going to break down and see if people can actually survive on the wages they're paid. So how much does the average person earn? Well, the UK's average national salary is £37,000, 430 a year. After tax and national insurance, that gives you about £2,400 a month to live on. Sounds all right, yeah? Well, let's see where that money actually goes. By ONS and .gov UK statistics, monthly bills for an average household rent or mortgage are £1,341 for renters outside London, way more expensive inside London, and a mortgage at £1,056 for a typical home loan. Council tax, £180, going up. Electricity and gas, £117, going up. Water bills, £44, going up. Groceries, £310, and that's before you even add a bottle of wine. Fuel, £79, probably going up. Clothing, soap, toothpaste, etc., etc., £77. So what's left? If you rent, you are left with £252 a month at the end of the month. If you own a home, you have £537 left. And that's all before you even think about insurance, phone bills, internet, childcare, savings, emergencies, or any modicum of a social life. And this is for someone on an average salary. What about those on minimum wage, which has recently gone up to £12.12, or is going to go up in April to £12.12. That means a full-time worker, 40 hours a week, will earn £25,400 a year. After tax, they will take home £1,700 a month. But the average monthly bills for a renter are £2,148. That means they're £448 short every single month just to survive. And I'll reiterate, that does not count insurance, phone bills, internet, childcare, savings, emergencies, or any modicum of a social life. So what salary do you actually need to break even? To cover all essential bills without any spare cash, i.e. zero disposable income, a renter needs to earn £36,823 a year, a homeowner £31,937 a year. So if you're on minimum wage, you are miles off from being able to survive without taking on debt, getting benefits or cutting essentials. The conclusion? How are people supposed to live? The numbers do not lie, and they are government published statistics. Even those earning the average salary are just scraping by. And if you're on minimum wage, you're in a financial hole before you even start. So the big question is this: how are people meant to live in the UK if wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living? Because right now, via government statistics, they don't add up. But I suppose Rachel Reeves has had her non-existent or working calculator out again, hasn't she? A YouGov survey that was done last year suggested that 45% of the UK earns less than £30,000 a year, which means that at least 45% of the nation, on average, at the end of the month, cannot afford to pay their bills. That's shocking.
I'm not great with maths, economics, all that kind of stuff, but I feel like this is a bad idea. Let's have a look. Now, I also want you to remember that by 2050, roughly, white British are meant to be the minority in Britain. And I do wonder who is going to abuse the fact that you don't get the two-child benefit now, the cap. I do wonder. Labour is speed running us into an apocalypse. The move will boost handouts by up to £3 billion a year, even as Rachel Reeves prepares another brutal round of tax hikes at the budget. So let me get it straight. You're trying to work out how to save money, and instead you're going to be handing out to actual leeches of society and then taxing people who put in the most money in taxes, who will then just say, fuck this, I'm going to leave the country. Right. Again, I'm not the Bank of England, but they're the same people that are saying diversity is our strength and it's bringing us more money in, but still yet to see that. But the wealthy are expected to be targeted to fill an estimated £30 billion black hole in the public finances on November 26. I told you she's going to be the scapegoat for all this. Speculation is mounting that Reeves will slash pension reliefs, free tax thresholds again, and bring a mansion tax as she scrambles for more cash. Basically, and I've done the article the other day, they want old people to give up their homes, their big homes that they've had, like, you know, they've worked for, so that they can then move into a smaller accommodation. And I wonder what are they going to be turned into, the houses? I do wonder, this fine aged gentleman, he needs a brand new house. We can have 8 of them in here? Sweet. However, critics insist she will inevitably punish ordinary workers with previous efforts to milk the rich having backfired. This is Communist 101. Let's have a look. So the slowing economy, productivity downgrades, rising debts interest, costs of a series of humiliating U-turns of welfare reforms have contributed to Miss Reeves' desperate flight. She already hammered Brits with a £40 billion extra taxes at the budget last year, the biggest increase in a single package on record. Oh, by the way, we're also giving how much? Billions to Gaza. We're not involved. We are just handing them money now to rebuild it. Just like we did the 100-year deal with Ukraine. Where can we get money from? Really weird. The Chancellor is reported to have been urging business to be more positive about the UK's prospects, warning that the unrelenting gloom of risks propelling Nigel Farage into number 10. Now, Farage has also said with the two-child benefit cap, but his argument was like, we want more, we want younger people to be able to have kids. It's not going to be. It's not going to be. Until everything is actually affordable, people aren't going to settle down with families. You're going to get the people that are going to abuse the system and have about 4 fucking kids, however much they're allowed to have now. And who do you think's going to be fucking doing that? I wonder.
It feels to me and to many people that there's just this big dark cloud hovering over the UK right now. It's just the whole atmosphere of the place, the energy. Just something's off. Unless you've got a bit of money behind you, or a really well-paid job, or you work all the hours under the sun, can you really afford a house? And it's just one of these dreams that I think have just gradually gone over the years. And it's not just housing, it's just the whole, like I mentioned before, it's the whole energy of the place. It's since the 90s, it feels like it's slowly getting drained out of this country, slowly at first, but it's ramping up now, and it feels like there's a bit of a snowball effect where just everywhere you turn, people are unhappy, people are suffering, people are just surviving. The mental health at the moment is just through the roof with everyone. Men, women, black, white, it doesn't matter. Everyone seems to have an issue with their mental health at the moment. They're on antidepressants, or like I've done in the past, suppress it with alcohol or drugs or just anything to take your mind off what's really going on, what's going on inside of you, what's going on in your head. The NHS must be bombarded with it, because the waiting lists, not just for mental health, for other things, it's just months and months if you're lucky, I suppose. Some are even years. I know violence has always existed, but these days it seems to be spiraling out of control, and it seems to be younger people getting involved in it. I know there was violence in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, all the way up till today, but it just seems the people are getting younger and they're becoming seemingly more violent. I'm hoping for the best. I always try and remain positive and hope for better days ahead. But it's just hard to see that at this moment in time. People don't want to talk anymore. A lot of people are rude. People don't care about the countryside. They just dump their rubbish wherever they want. It's like people have just given up caring about anything. People just seem to be carrying a lot of anger around with them. A lot of mental strain. So with technology these days, we're more connected in some ways than ever. But we're more distant. There's no community feel anymore. The shops boarded up or replaced with gambling shops to feed the gambling addiction, fast food places to feed the sugar addiction, vape shops to satisfy that addiction, pubs to satisfy your alcohol addiction. I remember growing up, it used to just be full of shops. Woolworth's gone. WH Smith's, I don't know if they're still around, but all these little local shops, local sports shops, local book shops, they all seem to have gone now. And it's all big commercial corporate chains, and it's sucked the soul out of towns and cities, I believe. Medicating ourselves through it with addictions and antidepressants, and you can't blame people for that. Like I say, I've done it. I've drunk, I've gambled, I've had addictions just to feel normal, just to numb it all, I suppose. And while all this suffering's going on, prices of everything's just going up. Food, utilities, it's becoming harder and harder just to stay afloat. It's just a matter of survival for a lot of people now. You just work and sleep and eat, work, sleep, eat. And it's just soul destroying, it's draining. I try and stay positive where I can, and some days are harder than others. But you do have to try and cling to that little bit of hope you have. I got so drained, so tired in the monotonous 9-to-5 rat race job. I don't want to get sucked back into the 9-to-5 rat race world. Try my best not to, because so many of us have been trapped by that. And you just work and sleep and eat, work, sleep, eat. You can't keep having to work this hard just to remain with a head just above water, barely. It affects all parts of your life. If that job is draining you, you come home tired, you come home snappy, you just want to numb yourself with a beer or something else. And I've been there, and it's not nice. But so many people are going through that right now. And I feel for them. Because it's not what life's about. Life's for living, not just to work, just to keep a roof over your head. And are we lucky in this country that we've got roofs over the head? I know there's many millions and billions of people in the world that are worse off than us. So I'm not saying the UK is any worse than any other place. I'm just giving my perspective on what it feels like at the moment in this country. And it just feels like it's dying. The whole country is slowly dying. The government are useless. They lie, they deceive us, they speak at us, they don't speak for us. Just put vent in the comments and it helps the algorithm. You don't have to think too much about writing a comment if you want to, and it helps everything. It helps it. Like I say, it helps the algorithm, it helps the video get pushed. And it seemed to work on my first few videos, and I've not really done it since. One, I keep forgetting, and two, well, yeah, I just keep forgetting.
This is London. It has 215,700 millionaires, 516 centimillionaires, and 45 billionaires. London is very, very rich. But the rest of the UK? Not so much. In fact, citizens of the once proud United Kingdom have less disposable income than the poorest 5 US states and the average OECD country. And if you remove London and the southeast from the equation, the UK's GDP per capita drops 14%. Life expectancy in parts of Blackpool are lower than in Rwanda, and entire cities and towns that once thrived now rank among the poorest in Western Europe. The UK has gone from the greatest kingdom on earth to squalor. How did it get here? This is the UK, the divided kingdom. Our story starts in 1979. Margaret Thatcher is elected Prime Minister with the goal of controlling inflation. In the lead up to her election, inflation had spiraled out of control. £100 in 1970 was worth over 300 by 1979. But what caused this? First, the 1970s were rocked by two massive oil shocks. When OPEC doubled and then tripled oil prices, everything from gas to groceries got more expensive overnight. At the same time, wages kept rising as powerful trade unions demanded more pay to keep up with the rising prices, creating a vicious cycle of rising prices, leading to rising wages, leading to rising prices, and so on. Add to this loose monetary and fiscal policies leading to tons of money floating in the economy, and you have a recipe for disaster. Guided by Chancellor Geoffrey Howe and hardline monetarists like Keith Joseph and Alan Walters, Thatcher had made inflation enemy number one. To fight it, her strategy was simple. First, reduce the money supply. Thatcher's government set out to strangle money supply, cutting sterling M3 growth from 12% a year to just 6% by 1984. Second, interest rates. In June 1979, she increased rates from 12 to 14%, then again to 17% in November, the highest in the history of Britain. The idea was simple enough: make borrowing expensive, slow down credit, and choke off inflation. Although this helped stamp down inflation, a stronger pound made British exports uncompetitive abroad, while sky-high borrowing costs crippled businesses at home. Manufacturers couldn't invest, couldn't expand, and in many cases, couldn't even keep the lights on. And the third thing was government spending. The Thatcher government aimed to cut public sector borrowing requirement from 4.7% of GDP in 1979 to just 1.5% by 1983. Concurrently, while in the middle of a recession, they did the unthinkable. They raised taxes. But Britain was already in trouble. More than 2 million people were out of work, and every month, another 100,000 were joining the unemployment lines. It was so shocking that 364 economists signed a letter to the Times saying the policy had no basis in economic theory. So the question was, did it work? Well, yeah. Although extreme, inflation decreased from 13% in 1979 to 5% by 1983. But at what cost? High interest rates, a strong pound, and spending cuts crushed manufacturing towns across the United Kingdom. Britain's industrial base was gutted and regional inequality began to take shape. Meanwhile, London was living a very different story. Predominantly a service-based economy, London, unlike much of the UK, was able to hold on. By the mid-1980s, joblessness in Northern England, Scotland, and Wales all pushed past 15%, while the South East and London stayed under 10%. But why was this the case? Enter the Big Bang re-regulation package. Thatcher had a vision of transforming London into a financial superpower through deregulation. Fixed commissions and exchange controls were scrapped, the single capacity rule ended, foreign ownership welcomed, and electronic trading unleashed. The result? International banks poured in £450 million into the city. 1,500 new millionaires were minted, and London cemented itself as the world's dominant financial center. On paper, the UK looked like it had gone through a renaissance. At the end of Thatcher's first year in office, GDP was around 1 trillion Great Britain pounds. But when she left in 1990, it was 1.4 trillion GBP. GDP per capita also rose from 15.5 thousand to 19.9 thousand by 1990. Britain was richer. But this data doesn't show the whole picture. During the same period of time, the Gini coefficient, a measure for inequality, increased from 25 to 35, meaning while GDP per capita rose by 30%, inequality rose by 40. So although Britain was richer, it was becoming more unequal. This was partly due to the extreme cost of Thatcher's policies on Britain's industrial base. For example, in 1979, manufacturing accounted for nearly 30% of the UK's GDP, and by 1990 it fell to 16%. Concurrently, manufacturing employment fell by nearly 40% from 1979 to 93. So yes, GDP rose, GDP per capita increased, but if you didn't live in London, it wasn't so obvious. The services industry grew, but other industries declined as the UK wanted to rejig its economy. Another way to examine the impact of shifting industries is the relationship between direct and indirect jobs created.
What about you? I can see in the next couple of months the hospitality industry coming to a grinding halt, development and construction literally stopping dead. I can see prices going up in the shops and farmers and small businesses on the brinks of collapse. I was chatting to a farmer yesterday, and he told me he worked out, as an arable farmer, he worked all year last year and basically made no profit. He said, it's unsustainable. I can't carry on doing that. And he said this coming year, they're predicting to have to spend even more on fertilizers, pesticides and all that sort of stuff just to get the crops ready. Up to 50 to 60% of their gross income in preparation of the soil and growing the crops, which is way more than it's ever been. So farmers, guys, do not think just because they're sat on a load of land, they got a load of money. Some of them are wealthy, but a lot of the farmers out there are working a bloody hard week and getting no money at the end of it. They're just sustaining their lifestyle. Development. If the government comes out and puts taxes on property, private homes as one, and national insurance on landlords, if they don't do something on stamp duty and they keep the environmental legislation that's in place right now, the housing market is going to come to a grinding halt. There's no second homers. You might go, that's great. There's no buy-to-let landlords. Maybe that's great, but you'll have some institutional landlord like BlackRock owning all your properties. Why else would they be at number 10 as soon as Keir Starmer got into power? So already the housing market is not seeing homes sell, and you're going to find the big boys, the Persimmons, the Barretts, the Taylor Wimpeys, all those guys, they're going to start doing deals on new homes soon because they can't sell them. And if they can't sell them, they're just going to have to rent them. And that will stop them investing in new development sites because, of course, why would you develop thousands of homes that you can't sell? So that's going to come to a grinding halt. We're seeing it now. I'm in the sector and we're seeing the beginnings of a very, very difficult market. Hospitality. If people haven't got any money and food prices are going up, they're going to start to struggle. Already you're seeing massive layoffs in the hospitality industry. We're seeing unemployment levels go up. It's not going to look pretty. But of course, Labour tells us they're on track to fix everything. Nationwide, borrowing up. Highest level of national borrowing that has been in 27 years. That means the debt that we hold is costing us more. That means it's costing the country more, which means the back hole gets bigger. Wherever direction you look right now, it's bad. British Steel, finished. The government's having to bail it out. We're having to pay them to stay alive. We're having to pay taxes to America for the privilege of sending stuff to them. That was a great deal. Well done. Mental, right? And we're importing coal from China and from India and places like that. So we're going green, but we're importing coal, we're importing oil from all around the world to sustain these steel factories and our energy systems. So we're going green and we're importing it all over. What's our carbon footprint going to look like, guys? Apparently, we're going green by 2030. That's not good. Wherever you look, everywhere you look, walk in the shops, pick up a packet of Maltesers, pick up a packet of Haribos, pick up a pint of milk. What's to happen to the price? I went in the shop the other day. Minstrels used to buy them for $1.25, $2.75 a pack. That's doubled. That's just one product. I went down the shelf, so I was like, bloody hell, those cookies used to cost £1 for 5. Now it's £1.75 for 4. The price of food is going through the roof, and the government says they're on top of it. Things are looking ugly. Wherever you look, in every direction you look, the European economies are slowing down. You've got China, Russia, North Korea and India forming a new power group. They're changing. Everything's shifting, guys. The taxes the government's going to put on you come the autumn statement. If they don't make some serious changes, our economy in the UK will come to a grinding halt. We'll be so busy paying people who don't earn. I saw a statistic the other day. 80% of illegal migrants who come to this country don't ever work. They're always maintained by the state. So we come in, we grant them asylum, and then they just live on the state. That's mental. If you give them asylum, you've got 12 months to find a job. Go out and work. I don't care. Doesn't matter. You might not like it. Well, this is a terrible thing to say, Steve. Guys, you can't sustain it. You can't keep paying tax. Millionaires are fleeing the country in their droves. In their droves. The high net worths, The 20 to 200 million pound clients, the billionaires, they're leaving. They're not investing here in the UK. The taxes are too bad. Small businesses, limited companies, family-owned farms who used to be able to pass on their companies to their estate. You know, granddad owned it 100 years ago, dad owned it, then now the kids own it and they want to pass it on to their children. Now they have to pay tax on the value of that business when the proprietor dies. That business may not have 20, 30, 40 million in cash. What's going to happen to it? They're going to have to sell it or wind it up. So you're going to see more unemployment coming through. And Keir Starmer says everything's fine. Don't worry. We've got a plan and we're working on the plan, and we've got a situation that was left to us by the last government. Guys, we need to wake up. We cannot just spend the royal. You can't sell all of your valuables. We can't sell everything we've got as a country to pay bills and formulate growth because we're taking money out of our deposit account and putting it into our current account to say we're growing. That's not growth. That's funding your own business. You will go bankrupt. And I think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and Wes Sweeting and all these guys, they want us to go bankrupt. They want us to run to the IMF for a bailout. Because if you look up on the internet, what are the terms and conditions of an IMF bailout, you will see they give a whole list of things. You can't retire until you're this age. You can't have this much money. You have to do this. You're not allowed to do that. These are the benefits you can have. This is the interest you have to pay. They give you a whole load of rules. You will not be a master of your ship anymore. You will be a slave rowing below the decks of the IMF at the steering wheel. Wake up, guys. How 35 to 40 billion is the cost of the Chagos Islands deal. Billions to Ukraine to support a war. Billions a year housing illegal migrants. Billions a year on pay rises that the following year aren't enough. We want more. We haven't had enough. Train strikes, nurses strike, doctors strike. You're going to see strikes everywhere. And when people strike, companies don't make money. My local airport going on strike, need more money. Guys, it's coming to a crunch time. I don't mean to make this so long, but I'm trying to get through to you. We have to write to our MP and tell them to change the direction of the country now. I signed a petition. 3 million people signed a petition for a new general election. I wrote to my MP and I said, hey, have you seen this? I got a letter back from Keir Starmer via my MP saying, you had your election last year, suck on it, basically. You voted as a country. We won. We got 5 years. Live with it. There's no more general elections coming up soon. And if you're a Labour MP, you're not going to go against him because you know you're going to lose your seat tomorrow. No one's going to vote Labour in the next general election. You will lose your seat tomorrow. So what will you do? You'll back Keir Starmer 100%. You won't let there be a leadership challenge because it's taken you 15 years to get into power. You're not going to blow it now. You would rather sink the ship and go down with it and then fly off to Davos and get your seat at the Davos table than you would sail this ship in the direction it needs to go. I didn't sleep last night. I'm seriously thinking that we're in trouble, guys. Seriously thinking about it. Let me know what you think in the chat. See you soon. Take care.
Is the government facing a financial crisis right now? Is the IMF going to have to be called in to rescue the UK? These are all big questions that are knocking around at the moment. And I want to show you a few charts that, well, they underline what's going on right here. Starting with this one. This is showing you the 30-year government bond yield. And what is that? It's the long-term interest rate the government has to face. The higher that is, the more it's having to pay for interest. Us, basically. And that is the highest level now that it's been since 1998, so you're talking about a generational high in the 30-year government bond yield. And of course, there's another question. Is the UK alone in facing high bond yields right now? Well, yes and no. Okay, so this is the dark lines here, and this kind of this area is showing you the rest of the G7, so other industrialised nations that the UK compares itself to a lot of the time. And what's striking about this is, in this period, the kind of 2020s, early 2020s, you can see the UK is kind of middle of the pack. It's around the middle of there, isn't it? Then you have the mini budget. And look at that red line, that spikes higher. And a lot of people out there in the market going, oh, suddenly I'm a bit worried about the UK debt. I'm not going to price it at the same rate that I would price everyone else. And so for a period, that red line is kind of at the top rather than in the middle. Then Labour come into office and they've got big plans to spend more money and invest more. And actually that red line is going above the others. Now, it's worth just saying there are various different ways you can skin this. This is one way of looking at it. It's looking at the total kind of levels. But you can also look at something else. So if we look just in the last year or so, it's a very different picture. Okay, so this line, it's the same data, but we're literally just looking at the change since the start of the year. So for instance, in the UK's case, since the start of the year, we're up by 0.48% in terms of that same line. Now compare the UK with the rest of the G7. So each of these is a different line, different country in the G7. And this is pretty striking, isn't it? Look, instead of being above everyone else, the UK is kind of middle of the pack. And there are other countries which are considerably higher. So for instance, look at Germany. Germany up 0.73%. Japan up by 0.92%. So actually, since the start of this year, which is kind of the period when everyone is starting to fret about what's going on, the UK doesn't look all that bad versus everyone else. It's just that the level is considerably higher to start with. Now, that was yields. Another thing that the Chancellor will always get nervous about is if the pound starts falling. And what happened to the pound just now? Look at this. It went down really sharply against the US dollar. So you put those two things together, and that is the kind of combination, the toxic cocktail that a lot of finance ministers would get quite nervous about, raising the question, what is behind this and what can she do about it? Well, part of it is about inflation. This is showing you the UK's inflation rate, okay? And it's just the rate at which prices are changing each year. And generally speaking, the higher inflation is, the more people think interest rates are going to go up in the future, and so they're going to assume that you're going to have higher borrowing costs going off into the future. And the UK's inflation rate is not just above the Bank of England's 2% target, but look at this. So we're doing the same exercise that we did with those G7 economies when it comes to gilt yields. This is UK versus everyone else when it comes to inflation. And look, we are way out of whack with everyone else. And so if you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, it looks like inflation's a bit kind of, stuck in the UK, maybe you're going to charge a higher interest rate for the UK. So inflation is potentially part of it, but as is what's going on with the public finances. And what's going on with the public finances is, well, this chart tells you a pretty stark story, okay? This is showing you the projections for how much tax revenue is going to come in the UK in the coming years and what's going to happen to spending, okay? And so up until recently, spending, that's the pandemic here, that little spike. Spending has mostly been above taxes, and that's why we have all these deficits. And the bigger the gap between those two lines, the more you're having to borrow. And the more you're having to borrow, the more people want to charge you for that borrowing. This is what's projected in the future. Have a look at that. Look at what happens to the gap between these two. And if you're kind of worried about the Chancellor being able to cut back on spending, then you get very worried about a line like that. And if we kind of break it down, the kinds of things that are responsible for this, we'll take that bar and we'll kind of disaggregate all of the things that are driving higher debt. It's health spending, it's pensioner spending. It's actually some of the things that the Chancellor says she wants to try and bear down on, but we know that she's struggled. So you've had all those U-turns about things like winter fuel. They've struggled to cut back on the difficult stuff, raising the question, what happens to that red line? What happens to that red line, and what does it do as well for the total national debt? Because if you take those two lines I showed you a moment ago, take one away from the other, work out what it means for the total national debt, the total amount that the UK owes, this is what happens. Going off into the 2070s, you are talking about a national debt that is higher than we have ever seen outside of war. 274% of GDP. But the final thought I want to leave you with, okay, is the power of productivity, which I know that sounds strange, because what is productivity? It's just how efficient we are at creating extra income out there in the economy. A little bit of productivity makes a big difference. Well, I'm going to show you why that matters. Because if productivity, and right now the Office of Budget Responsibility thinks the economy is growing at a certain rate, 1.5% in terms of productivity off into the future. If it turns out that we are growing less fast than expected, and so you've got less money being generated and less tax revenue going into the exchequer, look at what happens. Instead, it's not 274% of GDP you're talking about. I've changed the axis on this. Instead, with weaker productivity, you're talking about the national debt going into stratospheric territory, 647% of GDP. Really quite scary stuff. just because the economy is growing a little bit more weekly each year. And if the economy grows a little bit more strong, a little bit more rapidly each year, look at what happens. 2.5% productivity, and all of a sudden you're not seeing the national debt going up, you're seeing the national debt going down. And that is why productivity is actually at the heart of this. And we're going to hear a lot more about those little things you might be able to do to make a massive difference over time in the UK economy.
What I've just said is a simple, straightforward economic truth. We've had a national debt in the UK since about 1694, when the Bank of England was created to lend a little over £1 million to the then new William and Mary, who were on the throne together in a very strange situation that developed after what was called the Glorious Revolution. And we've never really got rid of the national debt since then. There must therefore be a good reason for having it. Nothing survives for 330 years without somebody benefiting. Now, one group who have obviously benefited enormously from the existence of the national debt are those bankers in the City of London who dealt in it. And you could argue that that's why it still continues. And I most certainly would agree with that to some degree because, and let's be very clear about this, they do undoubtedly benefit from trading in the national debt. And as I've explained in another video, they also badly need the bonds or gilts that make up most of this debt to underpin their activities as city bankers. So, the national debt exists to keep bankers happy, and repaying it would very definitely make them very unhappy because they would not have the bonds that they need to literally make sure that the UK economy could function in the way that it does, using the City of London to underpin our whole banking system. But there's more reason than that as to why we don't need to repay the national debt. Because let's be clear about why the national debt in its modern form, that which has existed since there has been no relationship between the money used in this country and the gold standard, must continue and never needs repayment. This national debt exists because the government has spent more into the economy as a consequence of its spending programmes that have been approved by Parliament than it has collected back by way of tax. That is a simple, straightforward statement of fact. That is how the national debt is created. There has been too little taxation, which fact has, of course, kept most people quite happy because I have noticed that quite a lot of people don't like paying tax, or at least grumble and groan about it, even though they know that it is incredibly important for the sake of balancing the economy. So, the national debt exists because there has been under-taxation. The only way to therefore clear it is, of course, to raise taxation, and in fact, to raise taxation in a way that covers past spending. That would most definitely be unpopular. But it's also fundamentally unnecessary, because the national debt does not just represent more money spent into the economy than has been collected back by way of tax. It actually represents our money supply. That money that has been left over circulating in the economy is not just represented by notes and coins, and there's around £80 billion of those in the national debt, by the way, because the government does owe them to the people of this country, which fact it acknowledges because it says on each and every £5, £10 and £20 note that might come into your possession, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of whichever one of those it might have been. Therefore, the notes and coins issued by the government are debt. But more than that, the money that has been left over by the government inside the national economy is part of our money supply. Not all of our money supply, because as we know, some of that is also created by private commercial banks when they lend to people like you and me if we go and ask for a loan. But a significant part of our money supply, something like 40% of it, is government created, and it is represented by, as I have said, the national debt. Do we want the government to stop making money for our use in the national economy? Would we like them to withdraw it? Would we like that to imperil the operation of the City of London? Would we wish, therefore, to actually have a future where all money supply was created by private banks at its whim, which is exceedingly volatile when it comes to situations like lending during the course of a recession, when the money supply by commercial banks falls dramatically? I really don't think so. I really do think we want the government to continue to play this role in producing this money supply, which is fundamental to our economic well-being. But more than that, let's be clear, again, as other videos have explained, the national debt represents private wealth because, after all that happens when the government issues gilts or bonds is that private people, whether in their own names or through pension funds or other savings arrangements, end up buying them. And, therefore, any increase in the national debt represents an increase in private savings. Far from this being a burden for those who own the national debt, this is a benefit. I've heard so many politicians say over so many years, oh, we must pay off the national debt, which is a burden on our grandchildren. They are so wrong. The lucky grandchildren in question will inherit a part of the national debt because it will form part of the private savings that their parents or grandparents can pass on to them. There is nothing wrong with owning a part of the national debt. If you have an account with National Savings and Investments, you do own part of the national debt because those are also included in the figure. And that includes things like premium bondholders. And most of us know somebody who's got some of those, even if we haven't. So the point is the national debt is actually something that people want to own. There is no desire to repay it, and repaying it would be a wholly destructive exercise. Have we got the right level of national debt, therefore? Well, that's obviously a good question, and it may be the subject for a separate video in its own right, but let's just point out the fact that the UK has lower national debt in proportion to its national income than most other countries of similar size that are doing quite well for themselves. Not all, but most. And that therefore indicates that we have not by any means stressed ourselves by having the level of national debt or state-created money supply, which is what we're really talking about, that we have. In other words, we don't need to repay the national debt, and doing so would be an outright disastrous thing to do. So why do politicians, journalists and commentators talk about it? Is it just ignorance? Or is there some other motive which is intended to simply reduce the scale of government activity as a consequence of trying to restrict the increase in debt and therefore deny people the services they want? I think it is this latter point that is their true agenda. But whatever it is, they're talking nonsense and something that is contrary to the well-being of this country.
In the 60s, we had the Beatles, optimism and full employment. Now we've got potholes, debt and Rachel Reeves. Tell me that's progress. I dare you. I will see you all on the next one. Take care of yourselves out there.